None of the books that I read for the month of June should come as a surprise, but I will say that I am surprised to have found all 4 of these books to be absolute home runs for very different reasons. Firstly, let's start with The Guncle by Stephen Rowley. This is something special because it is fun and it is lighthearted and it is exploratory, but you are still dealing with grief. You've got the gay Uncle Patrick, who is in charge of taking care of his niece and nephew for the summer after a very tragic loss for them, and them losing a parent is not the same situation, but Patrick has lost a partner, and so the children's dad, Patrick's brother, really he just knows that Patrick is who can help the kids get through this, and because they have similar experiences, and he knows that Patrick has like the wisdom that he doesn't have here, he sends his kids to Patrick's for the summer. And something really, really unique about this to me is that these children are written so fully. They are each their own characters through and through. They are not comedic relief. They are not side pieces to the story. They are not a tool at which like the story is progressing through. I don't know that I've ever seen that. Definitely not really in a queer setting at all, because most of the queer books that I read, which is why I branched out this month, most of them are romance novels, and they're about like younger queer couples and relationships and friend groups and bars, and it's not any sort of like parental roles. So this was something special to read because I feel like it was unique in that way, where you have like a queer older role model to look forward to in Uncle Patrick, just like these kids do too. I am so thankful that a friend lent me this one. Next, I read Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. If you hate AI, if you have boomer opinions on technology, and if you think the world is moving too fast and you would rather appreciate art and people than like CGI and shortcuts and ChatGPT, like this is the book for you. Pick this one up if you are looking to feel seen, if you are looking to kind of go back to what it was like when you found that first favorite queer television show, that first character that you really, really related to, and this will make that make sense in hindsight in a totally new light. You're following this main character who has like a very self-contained but meta experience, and you're going through him writing, you're going through him in meetings, you're going through him going on this like adventure to save the whole world. You're at like the Oscars. There are a lot of really, really great side characters. This is just an absolute ode to positive representation. Thirdly, I read Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a collection of 8 short stories by the author who wrote In the Dream House. And In the Dream House, if you have read that, is like a very peculiar formatting. So it was really, really nice to read just like a beginning, middle, and end story, I guess 8 times from this author. Because while In the Dream House is one cohesive story, you're getting it in all of these different bite-sized pieces. But then each of these short stories feels like a more solid body of work. You know, when you're listening to an album and you get to the end and you're like, wow, that artist ordered those tracks perfectly. That's how I felt about these short stories. They got better and better as they went through in a way that didn't negate or lessen how good the prior ones were. But I will have to say that like my favorite one was second to last, and I didn't even see that coming because I was just having a good time the entire time. And I will say my favorite one is The Resident, because it reminds me so much of Hill House and like Bly Manor, like just generally those vibes, but like specifically even like the book Hill House. But 10 out of 10 would pick this up, would recommend it to anybody. I think it's a great way to like widen perspective with tiny, tiny little things that you get to choose what you take them for. And I think that that is something that I don't read enough of, and I'm so glad that I ventured in and picked up a book that was less of one single book and a compilation of short stories this month, because that's new and that's different. And I'm, like I said earlier, typically reading books about queer women, but it's often about their queerness, and this is not about queerness. This is just full of queerness. Lastly, I read The Town of Babylon by Alejandro Varela. This was a cover buy, but I will say confidently that it is going down as my top read of the year. The Town of Babylon has a main character who is returning back to his hometown where he grew up for a high school reunion. And he's constantly balancing the current version of himself with the expected version of himself. You have all of the impacts of what it might be like to live in a suburb outside of a bigger city where nobody's really looking out for you. And it's down to the way that this book opens up and your main character is trying to just walk through the town that he grew up in, but there's just simply not the infrastructure for it, and everybody thinks he's weird for trying to just walk 6 blocks. And that is kind of used as an example. And I mean, even down to like the houses on the cover, the build of this town is intentionally pointing out every single flaw in our system. And something like that is really refreshing to read, because I think that we are in such a time right now of really noticing the pain points and why things work and what doesn't work, and when that's good and when that's bad. And this doesn't shy away from the fact that it's quite often typically pretty bad, and you can't escape feeling that way or noticing those things if you are a particularly impacted person, whether that be the sidewalks or who your neighbor is. And I think that this is just truly, like I've said it when I started this, but this is going down as my favorite read of the year. I could not say otherwise. And with that, that's 4 books. I did also read quite a few comic books. Still reading Spider-Man, still reading Bug Wars. I just got a new issue of The Seasons, and also Spider-Man Ultimate Incursion came out. So that's kind of when I'm gonna jump into July with some of these comic books, alongside the first 2 volumes of Revival, because Melanie Scrofano is in the new television adaptation of this. So I've heard mixed things about these books, but I want to read them because I want to watch Mel. And I would hate to watch Mel and enjoy it and then think I should have maybe read these, because I think you have to read things before you watch things. So I think for July, I'm predicting a pretty heavy comic and graphic novel theme, but I still want to try to read 4 books, because that is like my ideal jam. That's my good pace. I feel accomplished. I feel like I have room to read something that I like, something that is new to me, something that I'm curious about, and maybe even have room to DNF something because the pressure's not on. But I'm also still trying to really grind away on my mission of reading books that I own to knock out my physical TBR. And I'm stoked to say that this month I took 3 of those off of that shelf. So that's a huge win, and hopefully I can continue carrying this momentum for the rest of the year.